Awesome. Thank you, Cassidy, for that introduction to the Build Back Better program. As Cassidy mentioned, my name is Briana Murphy. I work with Chugach Regional Resources Commission as the Kenai Peninsula Mariculture Liaison. It's a role funded through this Build Back Better program, an EDA award that the state of Alaska received in 2022. Unfortunately, since Jason isn't able to make it here, he's the executive director of the Alaska Mariculture Alliance, so I'll try to fill in some gaps from his absence, but just wanted to kind of briefly give a bit of an overview about the Build Back Better program, as well as the Alaska Mariculture Alliance's matching grant program, which I think might be applicable for a lot of people's constituents here in the room today. So as Cassidy mentioned, mariculture is booming. It's been quite a hot topic here in Alaska, and I know it can be a bit confusing to kind of follow all the different funding opportunities. But mariculture in Alaska is defined as the cultivation of aquatic plants, invertebrates, and shellfish bivalves. It does not include finfish farming, which is of course illegal in Alaska, but sometimes needs to be clarified anyway. And quite a few of you may be familiar with the Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute, which is pictured here. I'm based there down in Seward with Chugach Regional Resources Commission. Alutiiq Pride Marine Institute was founded in the 90s through criminal settlement funds from the Exxon Valdez oil spill. It was managed first by the city of Seward and the Marathon Native Tribe, now the Chugach Native Tribe. And then CERC took over operations of the facility in 2004 and continues to manage and operate it today. CERC is a regional tribal nonprofit and consortium that manages and promotes the natural resources of 7 tribes within the Chugach region, including 3 in Lower Cook Inlet, that's Chugach, Manwalek, and Port Graham, as well as 4 within the Prince William Sound, so Eyak, Tititlik, Chiniga, and Valdez. APMI is the state's only tribally managed mariculture technical center, and it's been involved in mariculture since the 80s. But mariculture in Alaska and nationally started to take off around 2016 when Governor Walker formed the Mariculture Task Force, which was a selection of industry participants, including APMI's mariculture director, Jeff Hetrick, who were charged with creating a $100 billion per year mariculture industry within 20 years. The Mariculture Task Force eventually evolved into Alaska Mariculture Alliance, which is a nonprofit devoted to building up the mariculture industry in Alaska. And if you're wondering why the state would take such an interest in developing a mariculture industry, there are lots of different reasons. One is to diversify local economies, particularly the highly seasonal economies throughout many coastal regions in Alaska, and to reverse some of the sad economic trends that Sam touched on earlier. And it's one way to kind of provide meaningful jobs and opportunities in some smaller coastal communities. Obviously, this has never been more important than currently with the kind of plight of the fishing industry coming up this season. And another reason is food security. Over 90% of Alaska's food is imported, which is pretty serious vulnerability. And mariculture can provide a local food source that requires no fertilizers, fresh water, or arable land. And it's also been shown to have a halo effect on other surrounding waters, which can be an important way to boost other important commercial species. Adult oysters can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day, and seaweeds are not technically a plant, but they have a lot of the same properties in that they can uptake a lot of carbon dioxide from the local waters and then exude oxygen, which creates a really beneficial halo effect for a lot of a whole host of marine organisms. So this was all stuff that Jason was going to kind of touch on. So I'm sorry that the graphic doesn't really represent any of that. But just to get into that, you can kind of see some of the metrics for industry growth since 2016. 2017 was when the first aquatic kelp farms were permitted in Alaska. And so you can kind of see how that just boosted growth for aquatic farm permits. There was a 33% increase in aquatic farm permit applications between 2017 and 2022. Aquatic farm permits jumped from 65 in the state, which had been a pretty stable number since the 80s, to 87 currently. And over 3/4 of applications received since 2015 include the cultivation of aquatic plants. And acreage, which is maybe a little bit better of a metric than just permits, jumped from 350 in 2016 to over 3,000 in 2021. So riding that wave, sorry, of surging interest in aquatic farming, in fall of 2022, the state of Alaska was selected as a finalist for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Program, which is an EDA initiative spearheaded by Southeast Conference, the Economic Development Center for Southeast Alaska. And that resulted in the state receiving $49 million to build up its mariculture industry, which launched a whole host of funding opportunities and careers. I should mention here also that that funding pool has a requirement that 25% be allocated to rural communities and 25% be allocated to indigenous communities. So pretty important equity metrics and important for a lot of coastal communities here on the peninsula as well. This is just kind of a general overview of the different buckets of funding under the Build Back Better. You can see how it's divided, and I'll get into the more relevant sections here in just a minute. The first bucket of funding is the revolving loan fund. There's $10 million set aside for this program, which just basically aims to close some gaps for funding opportunities for new farmers and industry participants in the mariculture industry. Unfortunately, I'm not able to really speak to a lot of specifics about this program. It's expected to launch in summer of 2024. But a big part of it will be administered by Spruce Root, which is a native-owned community development financial institution based down in Southeast Alaska. And if you're interested in learning more, I do have a booth over there in the corner and lots of cards available if you'd like to stay in touch about any of these programs that I'm going to be touching on, particularly the revolving loan fund, which should have more information forthcoming in summer of 2024. Governance, coordination, and outreach. This is the area that supports my role. Basically, the Liaison program was established to kind of increase the pipeline of information flowing from each of the coastal regions back from Build Back Better. So there were liaison programs set up in Southeast, Southwest, Kodiak, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula, of course. Myself, I put my email up there if anybody's interested in contacting me. Again, I also have cards if you're interested in staying in touch or getting on the Kenai Peninsula Mariculture listserv. And if you've also got a foot in Prince William Sound or know anybody who's connected to Prince William Sound, my colleague Sean Donatal is the Prince William Sound Mariculture Liaison, and he's also housed under Chugach Regional Resources Commission. Workforce development, I'll let Tommy talk mostly about this one, but there's $10.5 million set aside to kind of build a pipeline for students to enter the mariculture industry. So the subawardees on this were the universities and as well as the Alaska Sea Grant program, but largely based in Kodiak. There are lots of different funding opportunities to cover tuition, housing, cost of living stipends, and internships, just to make sure that barriers to access for those educational programs are accessible to a lot of different people. And those programs are also targeted not just at traditional students coming from high school, but also non-traditional or older students looking to kind of make a career change to join the glamorous mariculture field. Research and development, again, lots of really interesting projects going on. There's not a whole lot of conclusive things that I can talk about here, but there are a couple different projects focusing on seaweed tissue analysis, basically just looking at the composition of kelp tissues so that we can kind of match farmers with markets. That'll be a really important project that's coming up and should wrap up around December 2024. There's a really granular but important project focusing on seaweed genetics that will have pretty big implications for aquatic farmers, aquatic kelp farmers, I should say. And then another part of this R&D component is the joint innovation projects. Those are administered through AFDF, the Alaska Fisheries Development Foundation. This was one of the first RFPs that was rolled out in spring of 2023, and there were 15 projects awarded. CIRC is a part of 3 different projects involving a seaweed processing component down in Homer. We're actually going to be having a processing workshop held in Port Graham and Nanwalek in the first week of May. And we also were awarded a project to wrap up some beach surveys for clam enhancement projects in Port Graham and Tututlik, and we'll also be studying hatchery cultivation protocols for razorfish. programs, and those are both still underway. So again, don't have anything conclusive for that. But most importantly, with this program, the second round of the Joint Innovation Projects RFP is out currently and is accepting applications until June 17th. Um, Eligible entities include for-profit and nonprofit organizations, as well as tribal and governmental entities. So if you or anybody you know is interested in pursuing some kind of innovative project to bolster growth of mariculture, then please come and find me, or you can also find the active RFP on the Alaska Mariculture Cluster's webpage as well. Green energy, this is a project that's still going on. There's not actually too much conclusive to talk about there. I'm gonna skip that slide. Oops, sorry. And equipment and technology, the first round of this funding just recently closed, and they'll be announcing the recipients of this award. I'm not totally sure what the timeline is, but likely fairly soon. This basically was just kind of targeted at making sure that different regions throughout the state had access to um, equipment and technology that's going to be able to move the industry forward. So specifically looking at flubsies to kind of bolster oyster growth, development of the oyster mariculture industry, as well as some DEC toxin equipment so that you can get shellfish toxin testing results more rapidly, as well as some seaweed processing and hatchery equipment to bolster the seaweed industry. There will be a second round of funding for a second round of this funding opportunity as well, likely in late 2024 or 2025, after the first round of funding was administered, and kind of see how some of these projects start coming out and see what kind of equipment and technology are going to be necessary to move the industry forward. This is just an image of the Alaska Mariculture Cluster's webpage. You can find it at alaska-mariculturecluster.org. It's got all the active and archived RFPs there, and you can also find all the different buckets of funding that have kind of gone over here if there's anything that you're interested in following up on. And the last thing that I want to talk about before I hand it over to Tommy is the Mariculture Incentive Grant Program. This is housed under the Alaska Mariculture Alliance, so it is not through the Build Back Better program, so it does not have the same allocation requirements that 25% go to rural communities and 25% go to Indigenous communities. But it is focused on private for-profit companies and basically just aimed at encouraging private investment in the industry. So this funding was established through funds allocated from the state legislature and Governor Dunleavy. There was $5 million allocated to basically encourage private investment in the program. That $5 million is going to be spread out over four years, and the first year was in fall of 2023. So the matching grant program, it is not misnamed. It's just a dollar for dollar straight up match of any investment that for-profit companies make in their mariculture operations. The one exception I should mention is that shellfish hatcheries or seaweed hatcheries, which are can be nonprofits, are eligible for this funding, but otherwise the funding is explicitly targeted at for-profit industry. The reason why there's the hatchery exception is because hatcheries don't make any money anyway, so it cut them a break and wanted to encourage their funding. So essentially oops, maybe went too far. No, actually that's fine. So the grant funding is broken down into two grants. You can apply for micro grants or for standard grants. The micro grants are $5,000 to $35,000, and the standard grants are $35,001 up to $150,000. Applicants are capped at $300,000 throughout the course of the 4 years of this program, just to kind of make sure that it's kind of evenly distributed throughout the industry. And eligible expenses include pretty much anything. It's almost easier to go through the ineligible expenses, which include like alcohol and entertainment, pretty obvious things that would not be shocking to anybody. But the eligible expenses basically would be anything that's going to help make your mariculture business more profitable. So, this is a great opportunity for anybody who already lives on the water. If you're looking to repower your vessel or, purchase a new boat that's going to be more suitable for your mariculture operations, that's something that this grant can help with. And all you need to do is provide should you be awarded, all you need to do is basically provide receipts of your investment, and then the Mariculture Alliance will reimburses 50% of whatever costs you paid out. Eligibility requirements, sorry. Thanks, Caitlin. Eligibility requirements just require basically that you're permanent uh, at the time that the application comes out. So last year's funding closed from it was administered first in October 2023 and then closed on December 8th, 2023. So they haven't announced exactly when the second round is going to come out, but it will likely be fall of 2024, which means that you would need to be permitted by that period in time in order to qualify for the funding. If you are not aware, the aquatic farm permitting window within the state of Alaska runs from January 1st to April 30th. So the deadline is quickly approaching if you would like to get your application in. Aquatic farm applications typically take about a year to get processed. So it would be so it does take some amount of time and planning to kind of get to that point, but I'm super happy to help everybody if you're interested in learning more about how to go through the permitting process, or if they just want assistance kind of in navigating that.
Thank you, Briana. That was a great introduction. I'm going to move over here. Works better for my neck. Thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Tommy Sheridan. I'm the Associate Director for Alaska Blue Economy Center. I'll provide a little bit of an introduction as to what that is and who I am here in a bit. But I'm just going to give you a really quick dive into what we're doing in Prince William Sound in particular. ABEC is the state serving entity, as is UAF, but there's some work that we're doing in Prince William Sound that could be duplicated here in Kenai and is. So I wear a lot of different hats. I was a participant in the governor's Mariculture Task Force. I'm on the founding board of directors for the Alaska Mariculture Alliance. In addition to other hats, I'm the vice president for the Prince William Sound Economic Development District. And so as we're having lunch at the food carts, feel free to ask me any questions. Something I won't be talking about here is another hat that I wear is I'm a dual appointment with Alaska Center for Energy and Power, and there are some interesting overlaps there with agriculture and energy, and I'm happy to talk about that later. I'll talk about some initiatives that we've funded here in Alaska, Mariculture Innovation Research Fund, and a grant technical assistance program, and then I'll talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing in Prince William Sound as it relates to workforce development. So ABEC was founded in 2019. It's not a really great time for an entity to be founded. Not a whole lot happened in 2020. Our founding director was hired on in 2021. We were the beneficiaries of a legislative appropriation in 2022 to support mariculture research and development in Alaska. So that's what we've been doing for much of the past 2 years. The blue economy is a really broadly inclusive term that's pretty buzzy these days. I live in Cordova. Blue economy is pretty much anything that happens there. Lots of similarities with communities like Homer, Kenai, etc. Fisheries are a big part of our economy in Cordova. Shipping, logistics, visitor industry, research, energy production, etc. But our focus has been on mariculture, and so I'll spend some time here talking about that. So we supported with some of our funds from the legislature a Mariculture Innovation Research Fund. We partnered with industry stakeholders throughout the state to understand areas of need and potential roadblocks to the development of the industry. And we developed an RFP in 2022 to support that. We funded about 6 projects at $800,000. And these projects are taking place throughout the state with partners at both UAF, UAS, and UAA. And we're really proud of the level of student engagement that we've seen. This picture here is of some students at University of Alaska Southeast that are deploying a water sampling kit to salmon hatchery in Southeast Alaska. Grant Technical Assistance Program is something that we've also been rolling out these past few months. We, along with many others in the state, have just grappled with all of the funds that are coming this way. And many mariculture stakeholders, these are kelp farmers, oyster farmers, commercial fishers who are looking to diversify their businesses. They don't have a whole lot of experience with complicated federal grant applications. And so we actually partnered with, UAF did, AVIC did, with a grant writing firm known as Grant Management Associates, who have a very high success rate, oftentimes don't take on a whole lot of clients. But we were able to partner GMA expertise and their staff with 10 projects that are taking place throughout the state to help them develop, a strategic planning process, identifying grant opportunities that are coming up, and then ultimately helping them to write those grant applications and submit them. So we're very hopeful that that investment will bring great reward to those projects in the state of Alaska. And we partnered with Alaska Center for Energy and Power and UAF Center ICE on funding for that. So more close to home for me, ABEC has a relationship with the city of Valdez where we support their interests in growing this industry in and around Valdez, Sound, and beyond. And so we've been very involved with, of course, the Alaska Mariculture Cluster program that Briana described, which has brought up to date about $1.6 million to Prince William Sound College. That's a part of the University of Alaska Anchorage system, similar to Kenai Peninsula College. And we've been working with Prince William Sound College and other partners in Valdez to develop a workforce development program that certainly includes college students, but high school students as well, as I'll describe. Some other developments that have happened in Alaska that Briana didn't reference is NOAA has a nationwide program of identifying regions that are promising for aquaculture development. This is known as the Aquaculture Opportunity Area. So those are fairly significant programs that help support those regions in federal permitting and developing research and an understanding of this area of opportunity. The first AOA was in the Gulf of Mexico. Second was offshore from California. And the third is in Alaska. And Alaska was competing with the entirety of the nation for that third slot. And we had just really remarkable support from industry stakeholders in the state of Alaska itself. And so we won that this past year and are working towards that. One of the other hats I wear is with Alaska Center for Energy and Power, as I made reference to. And there's an interesting and really collaborative development in Valdez where some of those programs' interests are co-funding a teaching through technology site, which I'll describe here in a second. So something that we're working on with Prince William Sound College is just identifying prospective farm sites in the vicinity of Valdez. So this is our first trip in April of 2023. I wish I had shared a picture here from a trip that we took a couple weeks ago. We grew from, one professor on board, Amanda Glazier, who is an absolute rock star in the space at Prince William Sound College in Valdez, to a boat full of students. So Prince William Sound College now has, their dorms are full, and they have 15 mariculture students participating in their program there. And there's a waiting list for the fall. So this is a really exciting space for students. We're doing some sampling with these students in and around Port Valdez to work towards permitting a site where we hope to have opportunities for industry participants, but certainly a workforce development platform for the college and a research platform for folks at UAF and beyond. So Teaching Through Technology is a program, T3, I believe they're active in Seward. They're a really interesting program. It was designed by a science teacher from Cordova. He was Teacher of the Year maybe 15, 20 years ago, Adam Lau. And so this is a STEM program geared towards 11th and 12th graders, and it's being rolled out throughout the state and has nationwide ties as well. The original impetus was energy, and so engaging high school students with energy programs, energy applications, but really the program has grown to follow interests that the students have, and in a lot of coastal Alaskan communities, students want to be involved in mariculture. So we've funded work to develop a mariculture curriculum with Dr. Glazier at Prince William Sound College. That curriculum will be incorporated into a mariculture club that is program-wide, so students will be able to do that from any community in the state. And this is just a picture of some of those students in Valdez this past summer as they visited both Valdez and Cordova as part of a Team Ocean group. So this is just one of the students that visited an oyster farm in Port Valdez. Valdez Native Tribe has a research farm in the port in addition to permitting for a kelp and oyster farm outside of the port. We brought students to a local processor. This is Silver Bay Seafoods on the left. And then we brought students to the city council meeting on the right. And as it turned out, the city council just loved what they were doing and ultimately have funded for the establishment of a T3 site in Valdez in 2024. These are students that both high school and college that are doing mariculture sampling in Valdez Harbor last year. And this, as I've said, has grown significantly. So a little bit about some of the areas of opportunity that we're working towards at University of Alaska Fairbanks. This is just a graph showing some of the applications for kelp, seaweed, macroalgae. At the top are high value food kind of related nutraceutical opportunities. These are low volume production, high value. This is something that really fits with Alaskans' mindset. A lot of the folks that are getting involved in this space are commercial fishers with small boats that are really leveraging those assets to get involved in this area. For now, kelp production, essentially you outplant in October, November, December, and you harvest in April, May. And so it's a really complementary activity to salmon fishing, for example. But there's a whole lot of other things that we can use macroalgae for. And something that UAF is really interested in getting involved with, as are others, are some of the larger volume applications, including agricultural applications. This includes soil amendments or biofertilizers and other materials such as bioplastics. So this is something that we believe a rising tide lifts all ships. And so these markets are markets that we're really hoping to try to develop and inform. And we do that in large part because UAF is the only land-grant university in the state. It's one of only a few on the West Coast of the United States. And so through that, we have capacities, infrastructure, and connections to funding, such as USDA, to really get involved in ways that are very new to this entity and university, but are relevant. And so the applicable entity that is engaged in the Kenai area is the Institute of Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Extension. And so we have research farms in Palmer and in Fairbanks and partners throughout the state. So Prince William Sound is just to the east. There's a lot of ties between Prince William Sound and Kenai, of course, Kenai Peninsula, in ways that I'm sure many in this are aware. The salmon industry, salmon processing, visitor industry, et cetera. And we believe that Prince William Sound provides some unique opportunities to be an engine for the state in this area, including ancillary production and opportunities in Kenai Peninsula. So these stars are locations of large salmon hatchery operations and or remote release sites that are really compatible and conducive to large-scale macroalgae production. For reasons such as this. This is Wally Nornberg Hatchery in northwestern Prince William Sound. This is a really large, complicated facility with hydroelectric power, with housing for workers, with access to skiffs, anchors, and remote bays that have been permitted for decades for large-scale aquaculture. In this case, salmon hatchery operations. But again, macroalgae production is highly complementary to salmon production. So salmon hatchery operators throughout the state are really kind of working and exploring why and how they can get involved in this space. And in Prince William Sound, if that were to happen, that's pretty significant. The areas in the vicinity of salmon hatchery operations that are permitted for commercial aquaculture and or fishing add up to roughly about 200,000 acres. Now, I'm not suggesting we'll grow kelp in every square inch of that, but even a small subset of that would really be a game changer for the state in this space. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about just unique assets that exist in these regions and communities. These are grain silos in Valdez. Unfortunately, they never saw a single grain, and so they're very expensive cell phone towers. But we, as a part of some engagement with international leaders in the mariculture space, we hosted a tour in fall of 2021 where a fellow who is a big player in this space, we dropped them off at the terminal here, and he got out of the van and he looked up at the silos and he cursed in Faroese. He's from Faroe Islands, and immediately got on FaceTime with his engineer in Iceland, because one way to stabilize large-scale macroalgae production is in silage. And so these grain silos were identified as potentially relevant infrastructure to the development of this industry. It's very aspirational. You would need a whole lot of kelp to fill those up. But these silos were offered up as a matching resource to unlock that $49 million potential by providing $6 million match for the Alaska Mariculture Cluster. So they're relevant, and it would cost about $80 million to reconstruct these to this day. There's all kinds of assets and infrastructure within Alaska that could be leveraged and pivoted towards mariculture. So this is just one that's a unique example of Prince William Sound. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Happy to answer any questions if we have time now or afterwards, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.